After that, the guild leader said unhappily, "Hey Wantner, why did you sleep for 7 hours? Your place in the top was taken." To which he nervously replied, "I was late because I stumbled upon some information." Immediately afterwards, Wantner said to the leader, "Do you know about the village of Winston?" And Jashuka replied thoughtfully, "Winston is a village near Byron." The next moment, Wantner added that it was there that the competition between the two players for the production of items took place. Immediately after saying that, Wantner added that one of the items created was an epic dagger created in less than 3 hours, and the girl nervously said in her head that it was definitely him. Hearing this, Jashuka mentally said in her head an epic item in 3 hours. Even the top blacksmith Panmir would not be able to make it. After receiving this information, she immediately shouted to her comrades, "Everyone immediately go to Winston." Hearing the order, one of the players nervously exclaimed, "Wait, how?" The next moment, Jashuka smiled and confidently said, "The last one to arrive will die." At the same time, somewhere in the Monster Kingdom, a player who was moving to the top was destroying enemies, receiving system notifications that you killed a poison walker and gained experience points. The next system notification sounded like this: "You killed an armored walker, you gained experience points." But there were more than a dozen monsters killed. The third epic class is the Bloody Warrior, whose attack power and abilities are specialized for hunting. This player was Katz, who was already leveled up and ranked as the second son of Japan's main conglomerate. However, his ranking, which had risen very quickly before thanks to his incredible epic class boosts, had not changed in the previous month, even though he had been hunting for a long time. Continuing to hunt monsters, he said in frustration in his head, "Why I can't get the first rank despite all my efforts? Is my ability so insignificant I just don't believe it?" Recalling his real-life situation, the boy said anxiously, "My older and younger siblings have made incredible progress in our battle of the heirs. I can't lose to them in the game." Immediately after these thoughts, the boy said in his head, "I need to get ready. It's time to go to the hunting grounds with higher-level enemies. I have enough money, so I need to buy potions to level up faster." Immediately after that, looking at his armor, the boy said disappointedly, "But I have one problem." After evaluating his armor, he angrily said in his head, "I can't find high-level equipment on the trading floors. What do production class players do in general?" Raising his head up, the boy angrily shouted at these lazy and useless blacksmiths. A whole month has passed since the girl said goodbye to Grid. Ephemera had already traveled to many different cities, and now she had arrived in the border town of Steim, the capital of the county. As she walked around the marketplaces looking for production methods, she was always lost in thought, and when she encountered another failure, she said in frustration, "There's nothing here either." Folding her arms in front of her, the girl said disappointedly, "It seems that I will not be able to find a method of making a magic ball, eh? How sad." Closing her eyes in despair, the girl said in frustration, "Looking for a production method for high-level items is too hard. I couldn't find anything for a whole month." Walking further through the capital in search of the items she needed, she said in frustration, "I got gold coins for the quest, but I don't even have anything to spend them on." The next moment, she looked down and sighed in frustration, saying, "It's annoying, but now it's getting quite unpleasant." Raising her head up to one of the columns, she said angrily, "Show yourself, I know you're there." Not seeing any reaction from the one who was following her, the girl mentally said, "Thanks to my class, my detection abilities are quite high, but I am being followed when I did not even reveal my name and remained a secret runner." Looking in the direction of the boy who was trying to hide from her, she mentally said, "This is the first time this has happened to me. Who could it be?" Immediately afterwards, she angrily repeated to the spy, "I told you to come out." Hearing that he had been discovered, the spy who had been watching Ephemera said, in surprise in his head, not wanting to remove his disguise, "An ordinary blacksmith had discovered my disguise." Reflecting on what had just happened, Faker, who was a member of the Tzedakah Guild and the #1 assassin, said in his mind, "This is simply impossible. I don't believe it." The next moment, the guy received a system message from the guild where one of his comrades wrote, Don't be fooled by everyone. It's so clear that you have already been noticed." Immediately after these words, the guild members added, "Our guild will lose its reputation because of you, Boogeyman," and another line that sounded like you completely lost your grip after becoming the first killer. Continuing to observe the target, Faker mentally said, "After receiving the information about the production competition, our entire guild has gathered here." Looking at Ephemera, who was still waiting for the boy to appear, he said, "Thanks to eyewitness accounts, we were able to quickly find the winner," the blacksmith Aaron had rumored. Recalling the guild leader's instructions to them, Faker remembered her words, "I will meet her myself. Do not let her in before I arrive." Looking out for the girl so as not to accidentally lose sight of the boy, he mentally added, "I planned to follow her until Jishuka arrived, but she managed to spot me despite my 7th level disguise." Angry at the spy who ignored her, the girl decided not to hold back. The next moment, Fakir saw a bright glow radiating from Ephemera. Immediately afterwards, this bright blue light changed its color to orange and a magical attack headed towards the spy. When the building collapsed and all the spies lost their disguises, Fakir fell down the 2nd floor of the building and nervously shouted to his comrades, "Oh, you found us. Everyone is fine." The next moment, she prepared for the next attack to deal with the enemies who had been following her for quite some time, shouting, "Stop following me, perverts!" When everyone was in front of her and in range of her attack, the girl shouted the cry of an angel. Putting his hands over his ears to prevent accidental deafness, Fakir nervously wondered in his head how a blacksmith could use higher-level magic. Immediately after these thoughts, Fakir continued his train of thought, saying thoughtfully, "Could it be that this girl is not the blacksmith we are looking for?" The next moment, Fakir's mind was visited by an interesting thought that sounded like a trap set by a guild that is also looking for the creator of special Jaffa arrows. They want to deter us with false information. When the attack was over, you could see drops of blood pouring out of the guy's ears after the attack, and Fakir added in his head that the production competition was set up for him, and our guild, Tzedakah, was trapped. The next moment, the boy and his comrades, who had also been able to prevent the attack, nervously exclaimed, "You managed to catch us this time. Tell us the name of your guild." Hearing this, the girl said in surprise, "What you mean?" The next moment, she sighed heavily and said in disappointment, "Why is it that all the men I've met these days have been psychopaths?" Immediately after these words, preparing to activate the next skill, Ephemera jumped up and exclaimed, "First you followed my lead and now you're negotiating. How boring you are, you lightning bugs." Seeing how skillfully the girl used various magic spells in short periods of time, Fakir was surprised to hear her say, "Such power and no training, what nonsense." The killer didn't move from his seat as a direct bolt of lightning flew at him and confidently said, "It's a pity it won't work on me." The next moment, Fakir leaped into the air and struck the girl with a kick to the leg of her torso. Gritting her teeth after receiving a spanking, Ephemera said in her head, "This is the first time since becoming a duplicate that I've been hit by a player, and this guy is pretty strong." While the girl was trying to catch her breath, Fakir created his clones to dispel the girl's concentration. Approaching her with a dagger, he angrily shouted, "This is over!" The next moment, as his attack failed, Fakir quickly broke the distance and said in surprise that you destroyed my clones in one blow like that. Immediately after destroying her opponent's clones, the girl shouted out an ancient royal knight, and a giant golem appeared behind her. Watching the girl use completely different skills, neglecting her blacksmith class, Fakir nervously said in his head that she had summoned a familiars without being a summoner. It couldn't be. Avoiding the enemy's attacks, Fakir had to move rapidly across the terrain so that he would not be caught. At the same time, he nervously thought, "What kind of terrible power is a knight? This is the most terrible opponent for an assassin. I will use a disguise." Realizing that there was no point in running away and hiding, the boy pulled out his throwing knives and thought, "I can't fight this knight." Immediately after these thoughts, he aimed at Ephemera and fired 3 knives at her, adding in his head that he needed to attack his master. Firing 3 daggers at the girl, Fakir confidently said in his head, "Let's see how good your defense magic is." Looking at the girl who began to prepare for the use of magic, Fakir happily said in his head, "These are explosive throwing knives that react to magic." However, instead of using the barrier or shield skill, the girl copied Fakir's cloning skill and used it to dodge the knives. Looking at the way she had just used a skill of his class, Fakir wondered in his mind that she had just used an assassin's skill. How was that even possible? At the same moment, Ephemera looked at her opponent and happily said in her head, "I have collected many high-level skills while looking for a production method for the magic ball. Right now, I am in my best shape." The next moment, the girl's familiar struck again, forcing Fakir to step back again. Seeing that their friend was not in the best position and was being shadowed, one of his comrades shouted out, "Don't fight alone, we'll help Faker." And the boys' friends cheered. Trying to help their friend in the battle against Ephemera, the members of the Sadaka Guild were only hit by a powerful magic spell and seriously injured. When the golem had defeated all the enemies approaching her, Ephemera herself had a great opportunity to finish off her enemies using the dragon's claw skill. As a result of this attack, 4 fireballs flew, one for each of the enemies, bringing them to their inevitable death. Having withstood this attack, Fakir, who was the last one left, looked at his opponent and thought it was impossible that she was holding back the advantage while fighting against 4 runners. Looking into the eyes of the girl who was hanging over him like death, Fakir mentally added as if she was omnipotent, but we cannot even dream of that. Preparing to die, when the girl was about to strike him the last blow, the boy said in his head what a shame it was to lose with such a numerical advantage. After some time, Jishuka arrived at the battlefield, but she could only see the ruins left after the confrontation, and she wondered if everyone was dead and who they had fought with. Looking at the leader of her guild, one of the members nervously said that she had single-handedly killed 4 members of the guild, including Faker, and she had used all kinds of skills from various classes. Hearing this information, Jishuka mentally said, "It looks like she has a hidden class, otherwise I can't explain this situation." Immediately after these thoughts, the leader of the guild, Sadaka, clenched her hand into a fist and said angrily, "How dare she set her eyes on our guild as the strongest guild? We cannot turn a blind eye to this." Immediately after these words, without hiding her rage and hatred, Jishuka told her subjects to find her immediately. "I will destroy her with my own hands." And at the same time, somewhere in the forge that already belonged to Grid, Khan said to the new owner, "Hey Grid, don't you want to take a short break from work? How about this offer?" Not receiving any response from Grid to the suggestion of a break, Khan wiped the sweat from his face with a towel and sighed with relief and asked, "Wow, you don't get tired at all." Ignoring Khan's question, which he didn't even hear because he was so engrossed in his work, Grid mentally said, "It looks like I've been working here for the past month, and I've learned something from it." Holding a pair of tongs with a weapon blank in his hands, the boy said in his head, "First of all, if I do the same thing over and over again, I won't be able to get many experience points." Immediately after that, imagining the equipment in his head, the boy added that there are 2 conditions that are necessary to create high-quality items, such as the use of quality materials or the expenditure of a large amount of time and effort. After that, he turned his attention to the hammer he was holding in his hands and said, "Third, when you're working with heavy ore, dexterity is no longer important. You need high strength and endurance." Immediately after these thoughts, Grid, having finished forging the workpiece, sat down on the bench and began to wipe the sweat from his face with a towel, saying thoughtfully, "Ugh, should I take a break?" The next moment, opening the system window with his stats, Grid mentally said, "My stats and stamina aren't a big deal though. Just by creating items, all my stats have increased by 30 units. Immediately after these thoughts, looking over his skills, Grid happily added in his head, "And my crafting skill has gained a new level." In the description, under the skill it said, "Legendary Blacksmith's breath level, the parameters of the item created will be increased by." Immediately after that, Grid turned his gaze to the items he had created and mentally said, "The problem is that, even after creating the items and spending at least 6 hours on each of them." Putting his head down, the boy said disappointedly in his head, "I managed to create only 3 epic legendary items, and it was only my failure." The next moment, Grid picked up a book and began to shake it up and down, saying in his head, "Well, at least I got this list of production materials." Opening the book with recipes for various products, the boy mentally said, "There are some strange recipes that the Khan passed on to me as his descendant when I remember how difficult it was for me to take even one production method from him." Immediately after these words, Grid suddenly remembered Ephemera with whom he had stormed the dungeon together and thoughtfully said in his head, remembering the past, "Where is the girl who went in search of the production method for the magic ball?" Leaning on the table after remembering Ephemera, Grid happily said in his head, "I can get the material and recipe for at least a unique item, even though she is a very good support to me." Immediately after these thoughts, Grid suggested another scenario that was not very good, imagining an angry girl in his head. He said in his head, "Wait a second, if my item has a normal rating, then I'm screwed." Grasping his head in realization of what he had just signed up for, Grid nervously said in his head, "This witch could just destroy me. What should I do?" The next moment, a man entered the forge and asked in a menacing tone if it was Khan's forge. Hearing someone enter the kitchen, Grid screamed out in fright, "No, Ephemera!" Seeing Grid sitting on a bench taking a break and filling his head with stupid thoughts, one of the visitors asked if he was Khan's blacksmith. Hearing that visitors had come to their forge looking for Khan, the blacksmith stood in front of the players and firmly replied, "I am Khan. What do you need?" Having found the person they were looking for, one of the players immediately asked, "Did you participate in a competition with a girl named Arena last month?" Hearing the question, Khan confidently replied, "Yes, I did." Hearing that this was indeed the case, and that he had participated, another player standing behind him asked if she was really a blacksmith. "I need to know your opinion as a witness." After receiving such a question from the visitor, Khan thoughtfully said, "Your question is quite strange. She is not just a blacksmith, but an incredibly talented blacksmith. But why do you ask about it?" After Khan answered and asked a counter question, one of the visitors added, "Was Mero the only company involved in this competition? Or was there another party?" Not receiving an answer in the next second, one of the visitors said, "Hey, old man, answer quickly. Stop wasting time thinking." And Grid thought, "Why are these guys acting like this?" Immediately after turning his gaze to Old Khan, Grid mentally said, "Yes, he may be an NPC, but he also has feelings like everyone else." The next moment, turning his gaze to the impudent guests, Grid mentally said, "He's old enough to be their grandfather," and then exclaimed in displeasure, "Who gave you permission to address him in that tone?" Hearing Grid's voice, which began to show anger at the disrespectful tone of the guests, one of the players said to him, "Who are you anyway? Don't interfere with our conversation." To which he replied, "I am a local worker. You are interfering with our business." Hearing these words from Grid, one of the visitors angrily exclaimed that we should bring a gift to ask questions, when his friend grabbed him by the shoulder and said, "Hey, calm down." Trying to calm down his friend who had broken up, his partner said, "Calm down. He's just a rookie. You've become so impatient since Faker and his team won." Immediately after saying that, the friend added, "Sir, we just want to know more about Aaron. Didn't your successor participate in the competition? Maybe he can tell us something." Hearing this question, Khan replied in confusion, "We have only met her once, so how would we know anything about her?" Watching the conversation unfold, Grid mentally said, "They still haven't realized that I'm his successor. Maybe it's because I look like this." Having received a clear answer about the blacksmith's lack of information, one of the visitors said to his tense friend, "Let's go. If they don't know anything, we should ask someone else." Seeing the men out of the smithy, Grid stopped in the doorway and angrily shouted after them, "Don't come back, you uncouth impudents!" And Khan said in a calm tone, Look at it from the other side. And the competition became a hot topic of discussion. Immediately afterwards, one of the locals spoke to the blacksmith. "Sir Khan, let me take a look at some of the items." Hearing this, Khan exclaimed happily, "Oh, another customer. Your items have become quite popular lately, and we have had many visitors." Looking at the old man Khan, who was heading towards another customer, Grid smiled happily and said in his head, "Selling items here is not such a bad idea." Looking at Khan talking to the buyer, Grid said in his mind, "Working in the forge and dealing with customers is too hard for me, and auction houses or online stores require huge taxes." Folding his arms in front of him, the boy said confidently, "Unlike them, Khan doesn't charge anything at all, and if I continue to work here, I can become rich quickly." Immediately after these words, he said in his head in a dissatisfied tone, "But damn, this damn class only produces ordinary items. This game system is just a complete mess." At the same time, somewhere in the main building of the operational department of the SA group, one of the employees nervously reported to the boss, saying, "Please take a look at this email." Opening the message that came to the mail from Grid, the boss could read, "Dear Sir, Miss, I am a legendary blacksmith. So why can't I create a legendary item? In the last month, I created 3 items, 3 of which were epic. It's you who controls these probabilities. Yes, I'm right." Continuing to read the message out loud, the head of the operations department said in terms of, "What the hell do you want me to go crazy? Do you want to fight? Stop doing that," to which Choi Nahi told him in a displeased tone to stop reading it. After reading the entire message from Grid, the head of the operations department said in surprise, "But the probability should increase when his level increases. Why is he behaving like this then?" To which Choi Nahi answered him simply. Immediately after these words, the girl adjusted her glasses and confidently told him that he did not know that he had a legendary class, but he did not know about it. Hearing the conclusion of the employee, the chief of the operations department nervously said, "But still epic items out of 73 using the legendary skill. Now it is clear why he thinks that we are manipulating his chances." Hearing this, the girl said thoughtfully, "It is very strange in this situation. Such results suggest a bug or manipulation." Thinking of Grid, who possesses this legendary class, Choi Nahi thought about his legendary class. Remembering the guy when he was on his way home from work, she added that he was a real bad luck magnet. Looking at his income notebook, the boy thoughtfully said, "I've earned about 60 gold coins, which is about the same as a 1 from weapons and armor of the 60th level. Looking at his results, the guy said happily, "And this is all for about an hour's work a day, that is, working without a break. I would have gotten much more." Immediately after these words, Grid stomped home and said, "But why don't my mom and dad want to change their minds?" The next moment, imagining in his mind an object like the blade he had created, he thought, "If I want to surprise them, I need to sell a more expensive item, that is, a perfect dagger. But so far there is no one who has a higher level of dagger skills." Immediately after these thoughts, Grid sighed heavily and said in disappointment, "Since no one can use it yet, I won't be able to put it up for sale in the store, eh? I'll have to go to the labor exchange." The next moment, a booklet flew to Grid's face, and he pulled it off his face and saw an incredible capsule room. "Everyone who registers in September will get to visit our rooms." Seeing this wonderful promotion, Grid surprisingly said in his head, "This is a life discount today. This is exactly what I need." Heading to the very capsule room he had read about in the booklet, Grid happily exclaimed in his head, "The entrance costs 601 and the discount will make it." Walking to the address on the booklet to the capsule room, Grid happily said, "I'll play in the capsule room in the morning and afternoon and at home in the evening." Turning the corners to get to the building he needed to get to the registration, Grid happily said in his head, "From today on, this workplace will be mine." Arriving at the building with the capsule rooms he needed, Grid raised his hands above his head and exclaimed in his head, "From now on, I will forget about the labor exchange." That day was the day Shin Yun-woo became a full-time blacksmith. And at the same time, there was a huge demand for goods near Khan's forge, and one of the customers was surprised to hear that they were out of goods. After that, arriving at Khan's shop, a crowd of people who wanted to buy the wonderful equipment nervously shouted out, "You don't have the equipment made by the unknown master yet." Approaching the crowd that had gathered near the forge, the girl asked in surprise if these items were so popular, and the boy replied, "You haven't heard. Mid-level users can't buy them because they run out very quickly." Immediately after that, the guy added, "They are a bit expensive, of course, but their performance is better than any other equipment of the same level, which is why they are so popular." At the same time, near the lots with the sold-out equipment, one of the buyers suddenly asked, "Excuse me, Mr. Khan, where can we find the master we want to order from him?" Trying to get information from Khan about the maker of these works, the buyers continued to press, saying, "Please tell us, Mr. Khan." But the blacksmith was adamant and mentally said, "I can't tell you." Scratching his beard awkwardly, Khan looked back at his forge and said, "Even though he spends all his time and energy, the number of his goods is very limited, and he does not want anyone to know his name." Starting that very day, Mr. Khan was approached by a large number of players who were concerned about the same question. Who is this mysterious master? However, no one had any idea that the newcomer working behind him was the same secret master whom everyone had been trying so hard to find. Having finished his armor, which he had been making for so long, Grid prepared to attach the last piece to it and said, "I hope you will." Recalling his daily routine, the boy mentally said, "I play 15 hours a day, visiting the capsule rooms during the day, and thanks to that the number of items I produce has doubled." Holding in his hands the last part of the backpack that would become the final piece of his creation, Grid confidently said in his head, "And today is the day of salvation." Looking at the armor that he had almost completed, the boy said encouragingly in his head, "I made this armor exactly following Khan's methodology. It cost me gold, which is exactly my savings, making it the most expensive thing I have made." Looking at the armor, the guy nervously said in his head, "I wasted 20 hours and all because I didn't want an item with a normal rating for that reason." Putting together the last piece of armor, the guy said encouragingly in his head, "I hope you're legendary, or at least unique." After completing the assembly of the armor, Grid saw the delicate armor of epic rarity, and immediately after that the boy exclaimed in disappointment. Grabbing his head after another failed attempt to create an item of unique or legendary quality, Grid said in frustration that it was overdamn it. At the same time, Khan said in surprise that this rating was higher than the maximum possible in my production method is just incredible. Hearing this, Grid sighed in disappointment, and then looking up at Khan, the boy asked in a disappointed voice, "So how much can we sell it for?" Thinking about Grid's question, Khan said thoughtfully, "It's hard to say. We can auction it off and let the knights bid on it. I've seen one incredible set of armor in a parade before, but it wasn't nearly as good as this." Hearing about the method of selling the desired product, Grid thoughtfully said, "Put it up for auction means," and then mentally added, "Well, it looks like that." Looking at the armor he had created, Grid said thoughtfully, "Since the breadth and the skill of a blacksmith were used to create this armor, its characteristics were superior to others, and this was not taking into account the additional option. Although most knights had the level of characteristics of this armor, it would be able to attract their attention." Immediately after the offer to sell it at auction, Khan happily announced that this is a good opportunity. You will have to come to the castle to sell it, but this time there will be no tax as you think. Hearing about the absence of taxes, Grid happily said, "If there really are no taxes, then I'm in business. Let's put it up for auction. I've been in the forge for a while, so it's time to freshen up." After agreeing on the method of selling the item, Khan told Grid, "Since we still have 2 days before the auction, it would be better if you did something else." And hearing this proposal, Grid confidently exclaimed, "Okay, this time I can definitely make a legendary item." And so 2 days passed from that very moment. The very day of the trip came. Sending Grid to the castle for the auction, Khan told the boy to be calm. Immediately after that, trying to cheer Grid up, Khan smiled happily and said, "Don't be upset. It's just unbelievable that you decided to make ordinary objects." Handing Grid a keychain, Khan said, "Take this badge. Without it, you won't be able to participate in the auction. It will save you from extra points." Taking the object that the old man handed him, Grid received a system notification that said, "You have received the Khan's Air badge." And then the blacksmith added that it could help as long as you have hope for a better future. Sighing heavily after his mentor's words, Grid said in disappointment, "Hope and luck are two things that have never been in my life." Preparing to go to the auction, Grid took one last look at his mentor before the long journey and said, "Well, see you later." Despite the fact that the purpose of the auction held by Winston Castle was to find good equipment for knights, it was also used to find blacksmiths with incredible skills. A large number of different blacksmiths gathered at Winston Castle every year in the hope that they would be chosen and given the right to supply items to the Lord. Arriving at the castle and looking around, Grid thoughtfully said, "There are so many blacksmiths here, both players and NPCs. I can look for workers here when I become the owner of the forge." The next moment, Grid heard a woman enter the room and say, "The auction is about to begin. Please provide your items and choose a minimum price." Hearing this, Grid mentally said as he took his equipment out of storage, "Looks like it's about to start. I'll put up the platinum armor first." Taking out his equipment from the inventory, Grid mentally said, "And also to this set I will add gloves that were made at the last moment." The next moment, the guy thoughtfully said in his head, looking at his equipment, "The problem is the minimum price. I can't sell them seeing the price is too high, but how high can I make it?" Noticing a thoughtful guy near him, one of the participants said to Grid, "Mr. Grid, there's a problem." Paying attention to the person who spoke to him, Grid heard me, "Stang the blacksmith. It looks like this is your first auction and I thought you needed help." Hearing the name of the guy who spoke to him, Grid mentally said, "He's a player, but where have I heard his name before?" Without hesitation, Grid confidently said, "I can't decide on a minimum price." And Stang replied that he was right. "But didn't your mentor who gave you the quest tell you in advance?" Showing Grid the task with the description and reward, Stang said that they usually share all the information in messages, as it is to share information about the task. When Grid learned about this, he was surprised to hear that you were exhibiting your mentor's items and not your own, and the boy replied that I could not bring my work to the auction held in the castle because the quality of the goods exhibited here was very high. Immediately afterwards, Stang demonstrated the item he had brought to the auction and said, "But my teacher's skills are incredibly good. Look at it. It's a leveled rare longsword created by my master." Looking at the item and the happy boy, Grid mentally said, "It seems like you usually have to complete NPC quests to get production materials, but to see him so happy with a rare sword, what a happy child." Immediately afterwards, Stang asked Grid happily, "Now may I see your crafting items if you please?" Hearing this, Grid nervously said in his head, "What a splinter in one place," and then replied, "No, it's not much anyway. Can you tell me the standard price of level defense equipment?" Hearing the refusal, Stang said in anguish, "You don't want it, but I was so curious. The price of ordinary items on average varies within the gold." Immediately after that, Grid asked what about epic items, and hearing this, the boy exclaimed in amazement that your teacher created an epic item. It's just incredible. The next moment, Stang added excitedly, "Even if their options are not so good, epic items cost gold for gloves and about a coin for armor." Hearing the prices of the items he brought, Grid said in surprise in his head, "Gold is about there. If you take into account the waste, my earnings will be equal to 2 million, but it is still incredible considering the fact that this is only the first week in the capsule rooms." Immediately after that, Grid smiled slyly and said happily in his head, "At this rate, I will be able to pay off my loan of millions of one. Goodbye to my loans."